Dallas Goedert stays with the Eagles. We talk about the signing over the weekend on this episode of Eagles Latest right here on Fan Arch. What's going on, everybody? I'm your host, Cory Nidoh, and yesterday the Philadelphia Eagles and Dallas Goedert finally came to a conclusion on an agreement for the tight end to return for his 9th season in Philadelphia. And this was a little bit of a tricky situation because there was a bit of a deadline put on this decision by the Eagles, or they would have had to pay $20 million towards the dead cap hit if they didn't re-sign Goedert and he played elsewhere. And they kept moving the void date back, not once, but twice. But Howie Roseman once again figures a way out to get what I thought was one of the main pieces to come back to the Philadelphia Eagles. I thought there was at least a 50 to 60% chance that Dallas Goedert could be back as a Philadelphia Eagle. I know it was a little strange. It's a low contract, only $7 million, can get upwards of 10 or 11 with some incentives, but I just think that Dallas Goedert wanted to be a Philadelphia Eagle. I would have been shocked if it comes out that no team offered Dallas Goedert a contract for multiple years for $10 million, $11 million after a career year last year. But if you heard what he said after the Eagles lost to the 49ers in the wild card round, he clearly wanted to stay and remain a Philadelphia Eagle. And he was a bit emotional about it, and he got his wish. So he comes back to Philadelphia on a very inexpensive contract, and now they don't have to find somebody to fill what was looking like a major hole on the roster. And now they've got 3 tight ends signed. They signed Johnny Munt, who is a blocking tight end specialist who spent last year with Jacksonville, also spent some time in Minnesota, and then they re-signed Grant Calcaterra, who I know a lot of people weren't too thrilled about, but I think Calcaterra could still be a solid receiving tight end, and they just cannot put him in the blocking position. Now, it is something to note that Dallas Goedert was not the best blocker this past season. Was it because he knew he was only on a 1-year deal and maybe wanted to preserve himself a little bit to try and earn himself a big contract? But right now, that doesn't matter anymore. He's back, and perhaps he will also improve in his blocking game again. Goedert, 31 years old. He's just a reliable tight end one. And once some of the better targets were scooped up, Kyle Pitts was franchise tagged by Atlanta. I didn't know if David Njoku was actually going to be a fit or somebody of interest for Philadelphia. Cade Otton was a tight end that I thought could have potentially filled Dallas Goedert's role as a free agent. Charlie Kolar was a tight end formerly of the Ravens that some people thought could have been a nice fit. But Dallas Goedert has been steady Eddie when healthy for the Philadelphia Eagles. We know about his career year where he had 11 touchdowns last season. He was the top red zone target for the Philadelphia offense, and you want somebody like that back. Yes, is he aging? Absolutely, but he still has shown that he's got some juice left. And you look at where he ranks in Eagles playoff history. He's first in receptions with 56, second in receiving yards with 595, and second in receiving touchdowns with 5. So I think this was a no-brainer signing by the Eagles. I know they had to jump over some hurdles and kind of just go through different things to get it done. But it would have made no sense to accrue a $20 million dead cap hit if he were to sign elsewhere. Now, it's interesting to see what they do with this tight end moving forward. As I mentioned, they have Johnny Munt, who is going to be used as that blocking tight end to help set the edge in this new offense by Sean Mannion. Calcaterra has shown some small flashes when called upon when Goedert hasn't been able to play at times. But I'm interested to see if the Eagles will still target a tight end in the draft. There are a couple of talented, maybe second rounders, third rounders even, in this draft. I think Max Clare out of Ohio State could be a really good fit. Eli Stowers would be really nice. Obviously, Sadiq from Oregon would be the prized possession, but it doesn't allow the Eagles to have to now hone in on a tight end in this draft. So I think that while they could potentially get another tight end, they carried 5 tight ends on the roster last year. I do think that signing Goddard at least alleviates Howie Roseman from filling a major hole on the roster. So I think it's a good signing. Goddard, if they decide to bring in a rookie tight end, he could mentor them. He could kind of get them up to speed. And I think it's just telling with this type of deal that Dallas Goedert wanted to remain a Philadelphia Eagle. He loved playing with Philadelphia. He didn't want to go, and taking a $7 million contract, I think, surely shows that as he enters his year 31 season. Now, in his career with the Eagles, he's played 108 games, 409 catches, over 4,600 yards receiving, and 35 touchdowns. He has been a very, very solid player coming out of South Dakota State. Was obviously the second-round pick for the Eagles back in 2018. So it is a good sign by the Eagles. Dallas Goedert returns, and it also helps preserve cap space for Howie Roseman to still add more talent to the roster for the upcoming season. Now, somebody that they were rumored and reported to be interested in on the offensive side of the ball ended up signing with the division rival. Darnell Mooney had signed a deal with the New York Giants as well over the weekend. It was reported that Philadelphia was interested in Mooney. This is a solid wide receiver that we talked about on the show last week, I believe it was. And he signs a 1-year deal up to $10 million with the New York Giants. So it's certainly another weapon for Jackson Dart to throw to. Mooney, 28 years old, signed a 3-year deal with the Falcons a couple years ago. Had a really good first season in Atlanta, playing opposite of Drake London. Almost 1,000-yard receiving. 64 receptions. He had 5 touchdowns, but he hadn't been able to really replicate that success over the last 2 years. Now, I thought he would have been a very fine wide receiver 3 for the Philadelphia Eagles. Last season, he started and played in all 15 games. He only had 443 yards and just 1 touchdown. So certainly a down year for Mooney. In 2024, that was the year that he played really well with almost the 1,000-yard receiving mark. So the Falcons get rid of Mooney with essentially a year left on his deal, and they let him walk. They brought in former Eagle Jahan Dotson as a potential replacement. So now Mooney will be with the New York Giants. So I do think the Eagles obviously still need a wide receiver 3. Not sure entirely who they're going to be looking at. Again, now with Goddard coming back, maybe it's not that much of a need because the pecking order for years has been A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert. And last time I checked, A.J. Brown is still on the Philadelphia Eagles. So until that changes, maybe the Eagles don't address the wide receiver position, but they're going to have to at least sign a wide receiver to the roster as it stands right now. Darius Cooper, who definitely showed some flashes, especially during training camp in the preseason, maybe takes that next step, and he slots in as WR3, and they'll just draft a late guy in the round as a depth type of selection in the draft and see what he could possibly materialize in. But Darnell Mooney was reportedly on the Eagles' radar. They were certainly interested in the speedy wideout, and he ultimately ends up signing with their division rival in the New York Giants. And the Giants have made a lot of moves so far this offseason. I've been pretty surprised with how active they've been. They've obviously lost some of their guys to other free agencies and other signings, but they've been able to get a lot of good signings and good guys coming over. It helps that Harbaugh is now the head coach, and a couple of former Ravens are making their way over to the Big Apple. So I do think the Giants could be a little pesky in 2026 and not the doormat that they've been over the last couple of seasons. So certainly something to keep an eye out as the free agent deadline continues here, as the teams are looking to improve prior to the draft next month. So that will just about do it for this episode of Eagles Latest. Again, Dallas Goedert re-signing with the Philadelphia Eagles, the biggest news that broke over the weekend. And you can stay up to date with all things Eagles right here on FanArch on Eagles Latest. Make sure you drop that like button, hit the subscribe button. We're getting closer to 300 subscribers, and we will be talking to you tomorrow with more Eagles news. Have a good start to your week, everybody.